Flashes and Cool Topics, a podcast for women in midlife and beyond. At Hot Flashes and Cool Topics, we talk about anything and everything to do with midlife. My name is Bridget.
And I'm Colleen.
And today we are very excited to have Kristin van Ogtrop here. She just wrote a book called Did I Say That Out Loud? Midlife Indignities and How to Survive Them. She was the editor-in-chief at Real Simple magazine. She worked for Anna Wintour at Vogue. So, you know, that's a pretty big deal. She also worked at Glamour. She also worked at Premiere magazine. She has lots of magazine experience, and she is the mother to 3 boys. She is a wife. She has both of her parents still living, which is really great because she addresses that in her book as well. And I just really recommend this book to everybody, to all of our listeners, because it's so relatable. It's someone that is in our demographic that is putting on paper things that are going through our heads, you know, right now. She talks about, you know, your stomach and your abdomen. What's going on with my abdomen? Where did this come from? What's happening? What's all this changing going on in your body? She talks about your children, different phases. And we didn't even address that in our interview, the phases of disappointment. And I forgot to ask her how her children felt about that, but it's so relatable. Everything in it is so relatable. And you just feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. Somebody else is having the same thoughts as me. So right. I just really enjoyed it.
I think we got off on a tangent on her days on Real Simple and as editor and just the narrative for women in midlife during that time, because she left in 2016 when magazines were on the decline. So we kind of had a really interesting conversation about that, and just appreciate women putting pen to paper about all of our collective experiences, because it makes, like you always say, Bridget, us feel less alone. Right. And that we are not crazy, at least not for going through perimenopause and menopause. We're crazy for other things, but not that. But just the title of the book, Did I Say That Out Loud? I mean, I have said that before. I remember one time my husband, somebody was complaining at a table, and I remember whispering to him, can he just stop talking? But I said it so loud. And I literally said, did I say that out loud? Like, I was like mortified, but sometimes stuff comes out of your mouth and you're like, yeah. Did you ever have that experience where you're like,
oh yeah. And the filters are going. They're just like disintegrating or something. Like somebody put something over my filters that is just making them rip apart or tear apart.
So, and we don't care.
Yeah.
We don't even
care. We don't even care. And now I know why. You know, you always see older people just say whatever, and you're kind of like, what?
We're becoming those people.
We are becoming those people. That's right. Yeah.
And now there are books that actually prove we are becoming those people.
Right. And it's not just Colleen and I, it's other women as well. So, but it is a great conversation with her. I loved hearing about her experience, just her career experience, and also just all the musings and the essays that are included in this book.
It's a great book, guys. You really need to check it out. It's just, and there's an audio book too, which you can listen to as well. So it's always nice if you're, you know, in the car or something like that. Now that we're actually getting out a little bit, this week my husband and I went to lunch twice and sat outside. I was like,
I saw your photo of your outdoor porch meal. And I actually had one of my siblings visit that I haven't seen in over a year, that were both double vaccinated. And it was like, wow, I just couldn't believe I got to see her. Her grandson was being so good. He's double vaccinated. He's a student at Vanderbilt, and he came and he wore his mask the entire time we were around them, because I think too, he knows I can't get COVID and bring it back to a dorm. So he was being so good. I thought, what a polite young man. They have done something right there. So anyway,
I do see more people now that I should rephrase that. I do see people wearing masks out, which is really great, but I really wasn't out very much. So I can't tell if it's a change or if it's been this way all along.
Yeah.
Because we have really been isolating, but it's lovely to get out in the world and be cautious, but actually get to feel. It is a little anxiety increasing. I'm not going to lie. Like it's going to take a while to be in a crowd. I don't think I'm going to be jumping to a concert anytime soon.
I know. And I loved concerts, but concerts, and I loved cruises, but concerts and cruises
don't get me started on my really cruises.
I know it. And I loved them so much, but yeah, it might take me a bit to get over, that,
exactly.
That's a whole new therapy.
There. Yeah, exactly. We need to book another therapist. Okay. We actually should have somebody on to talk about
getting over, post-COVID anxiety. Yes.
So guys, here's our interview with Kristin van Ogtrop. We hope you enjoy it, and we'll talk to you after.
Welcome back to Hot Flashes and Cool Topics. And we are so excited today to have Kristin van Ogtrop on. She has just come out with a wonderful book, and it's Did I Say That Out Loud? Midlife Indignities and How to Survive Them. And you've also written another book as well. And now I'm going blank about the title of that book.
Okay.
What book was that?
I can tell you. It was called Just Let Me Lie Down.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was a humor book for working moms.
Oh, so, just right up our alley, to our listeners. And you also were the editor-in-chief at Real Simple magazine, which I loved and read when you were, had that magazine and used it as my other reference library besides People magazine.
Thank you.
Where I saw your book in People magazine. So that's where I came across your book, and I thought we have to talk to her. So we are so happy you're here, and thank you for taking your time to talk to us.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. It's really nice to talk to you too.
Well, thank you. And so my first question is, what sparked your, just your interest or your thing that just said, I have got to write a book about this?
Well, I think for a lot of nonfiction writers who write personal essays, the way you sort of write to make sense of your world, right? We all have different mechanisms we use to kind of make ourselves feel better or understand what we're going through. And so I've always kind of written about my own experience, whether it was just for my own, just for myself or for publication. And when I was the editor of Real Simple, a job that I held for 13 years, I had to write this monthly editor's letter. And, the one of the great things about that job was the readership of the magazine was very similar to me demographically, right? And so I would get responses from readers who would say, oh, I feel like you're my friend. I feel like you're in my head. That exact same thing just happened to me. Oh, I can't. And so it just made me realize how big the community of like-minded women is, which is obviously not a genius realization, but also how satisfying it is to read about the experience of someone who is like you, that makes and who is either going through the same struggles or enjoying the same things, and how great it feels to feel part of a community, no matter what the community is. This is obviously, middle-aged women is a gigantic community, but so that's so I took a couple of years off in between jobs after I left the magazine industry, and I started writing this book, and I wasn't really sure what it was. I was just writing. And then eventually it became clear that it was going to become this book.
Yes. Yeah. And, you're mentioning your jobs, and you have a chapter in there about, you loved Real Simple and how it was just the dream job that you had, but the process in which you quit. And so many women face different dilemmas, in that. Can you talk a little bit about, without giving away the whole story, but a little bit about what led to that?
Oh gosh. It's funny that you mentioned this sort of off the bat, because before I got on this podcast with you two, I got a text from an old colleague. So that one chapter, which in the book is called The Shalom Amulet, How to Know When Your Career is Over. And I explained in the chapter why it's called The Shalom Amulet. But there's a website that called Ed 2010 that a lot of media people go to. It's been around for a while. And the woman who runs that website excerpted that chapter. And it's like, anyway, what I was starting to say is a former colleague texted me right before I got on with you two and said, I cannot tell you how many people have sent me that excerpt, it's now in the double digits, and it just went up like 5 days ago or something. But everybody in the magazine industry, I think, not everybody, but a lot of people, I think, read it and understand, because many of us felt the same way. Anyway, so Bridget, back to your question. I sort of fumbled my way into magazine journalism when I was in my late 20s, after trying a few things that didn't feel like they fit me. And I started working at Vogue, and it was really, and knowing nothing about fashion and not really caring about fashion, but I felt immediately like I had found my people. And after that, I worked for a small number of different magazines. And then in 2003, I ended up at Real Simple, which at that time was a 3-year-old magazine, which was part of Time Inc., which was owned by Time Warner. And it was a magazine that was really kind of on the ascendancy. I mean, when I got there, it already had a passionate readership. And basically my job for the next 13 years was to see how big that thing could get. Mm-hmm. But after about 2010, I would say, and this is really the fault of all of our children, PS, including mine, because people, like I look at my kids who read everything on their phones, and so what that meant for print magazines was print advertising revenue, which is what supported a magazine like Real Simple, really started declining. And digital revenue was not filling the gap. I don't work in magazines anymore is the fault of my children and your children and children everywhere, basically, because they all read everything on their phones, and which is an amazing gift. It's an amazing device to be able to read. My oldest son reads like long, he was reading like a Charles Dickens novel on his phone once. And I was like, are you out of your mind? Like that seems so unappealing to me. But anyway, so what it meant for magazines, though, was that print revenue, which is really the engine that drove magazines, really started declining after, I would say, maybe, 2008, 2010. And digital revenue was not filling the gap that created by print revenue loss. And what that meant for somebody like me running a brand like Real Simple was I just had to start firing people a lot. And so my job, which had been just really fulfilling, editing a magazine like for people like you two, like smart women who are leading interesting lives and just want some kind of measure of control in their daily life. It was a really satisfying population to create content for. But my job really became about managing decline. And that's what the last probably 3 or 4 years was of this, what had been a really, really wonderful career. And so combining firing people, which, there were, as I write about in the book, there were, over the course of my career, there's some things I got better at as I got older and did more often. And firing people was not one of those things. Like I never got better at firing people. Mm-hmm. I knew the things to say. I knew the HR sanctioned things you say when you fire a person, but it never felt easier or better. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of really soul sucking after a while, particularly when you feel, as I did, and I write about this in the chapter, that the management of the company, the corporate team, was not particularly supportive or smart in their decision making sometimes. Anyway, so combine the fact that there's a moment I write about in the book where I'm at my gynecologist's office and I say to her, I think I'm either going through perimenopause or I'm depressed or I need to find a new job. Mm-hmm. And she said to me, well, it might be all three. And I was like, great. So I combined the fact that I'm kind of a fairly easily bored person who was in the same job for a really long time that wasn't growing because there was no money to invest. And I was firing all these wonderful people. And it was sort of like, it was all sort of too much. Mm-hmm. And so I left at the end of 2016 and it was which led to kind of an identity crisis eventually, but at that time, it was still the right thing to do. And I felt really liberated and I felt really lucky that I could walk away from that job.
You talk about starting your career in Vogue with Anne Wintour.
Mm-hmm.
And you're very honest in your description of her and what a tough boss she could be. And then you kind of jumped over to Premier with a very different type of boss. You were lucky in the respect of having a lot of female bosses.
Yes.
What did you take away from that when you went to Real Simple? Like, how did you merge all that kind of knowledge you learned?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, Anna Wintour was an excellent boss. She was at the time, you know, I was in my 20s and early 30s. She was scary. She was really scary. But the great thing about her, and the reason she has been successful for so long, is she knows exactly what she wants. She knows exactly what the Vogue brand is and what fits and what doesn't fit. She makes decisions really quickly, and she rarely changes her mind. And so she's very clear in that way. She's really tough, but in that way, she was a really easy boss to work for because she communicated really clearly. She disliked most things, but she was clear about it, you know, whereas I've worked for other people who I don't write about in the book, and I'm not going to name names, who are really indecisive. And that is a really hard kind of boss to work for, because you think like, I don't know what to do. Like, you're changing your mind. And, you know, anyway, but to your question, Colleen, I think that all of the bosses that I worked for, which I write about in the book super briefly in that chapter, I feel like I learned I took a little thing away from each one of them. Well, I without knowing I was doing it, I guess, I think what I did was I identified the strengths that they possessed as bosses. I identified those traits that existed in me. And then I kind of used that to put together my toolbox to be a boss but it wasn't conscious. But looking back, I think that's what I did. And I do write about this in the book. I thought that when I took the job at Simple running the editorial team, I really labored and worried about like what kind of boss I should be. Because I'd never been I'd had an assistant, but I'd never run a team of people. And my husband said to me, you know, they hired you for the person that you are. And so just be who you are, and it'll probably work out. But I will say that at that time, you know, Time Inc. was a really healthy company with a very skilled and robust human resources department. So if I had a problem or an opportunity or something I didn't know how to fix, I had really skilled people to turn to and say, I need help with this thing. Mm-hmm. But I also think that that's, not to like pat myself on the back, but I think that that is a quality of a good boss, someone who knows what she doesn't know and knows who to ask for it, you know?
Yeah.
And so that worked for me with the HR department at Time Inc.
Oh, that's great to hear. For the time, because you just hear so many times that you don't get the support that you need. So it is great to hear that. And nobody knows everything. You know, no one knows everything. So that's great advice that you just now gave, just to know where to look for help and to admit when you don't know everything. So that's great. And the cover of your book. I want to talk about the cover.
Okay.
That whole incident was so surprising. And so
yes,
if you don't
to
mind,
me too.
oh, I bet.
If you don't, for the listeners, it's a fork missing one of the prongs. So.
It's a plastic fork missing a tongue. Yeah.
Yes.
And, you know, if you could talk about that and just the whole shock of everything about that, and you know, just having to stay in the hospital for that amount of time as a surprise. Nobody wants that.
Right.
Sometimes if you have certain things going on or procedures, you have a little planning time, but you didn't have any planning time. Right. So could you share what happened? Yeah.
Sure. Sure. So the cover of the fork, as you were saying, Colleen, the cover of the fork. The cover of the book has a picture of a plastic fork missing one of the tines. And then there's this kind of disturbed, maybe dead looking face drawn onto the fork with very hollow eyes, which sort of captures that moment in my life. Anyway, the first essay of the book is called Fork Lady, which explains the cover. And it tells the story of a time that I swallowed part of a fork without realizing I had done it, and ended up in the hospital for 6 days. And it was just really, it was a very eye-opening, and I don't know if this is true for you too, but you know, I've always thought of myself as like a really healthy person. Like I work out. My mom was a registered dietitian, so I feel like I'm a really healthy eater. I mean, I do drink every single day, which I'm probably not supposed to do, but I don't drink a ton. And I have 1 glass of wine every single day, which, you know, a friend of mine was like, you need to skip a day. And I was like, oh God, I'm not sure that I want to skip a day. so I do that. But, you know, I think of myself as really healthy. And, you know, sort of related to the fork essay, I'm in kind of, as I'm talking to you today, I'm in the midst of this long root canal drama. And I have been on so many antibiotics in the last like 2 weeks. And I said to my husband, and like the stupid root canal situation is not really, it's slowly resolving itself. But like, I think I have health, you know, people talk about body dysmorphia. I think I have health dysmorphia. Like, I think I'm super, super healthy with an incredibly strong immune system, and I'm just going to like bounce right back. And as it turns out, it doesn't always happen that way. So with the fork, you know, I not knowing it, swallowed this piece of plastic and it perforated my stomach. And I ended up in the hospital where I learned a lot about body parts I knew nothing about and my own mortality. You know, it was the first time. I was saying this to somebody the other day, you know, when you're younger, I always associated in my 30s, certainly, and even in my early 40s, because I had my last child when I was 42, I associated hospitals with exciting, happy things, right? Because you go to the hospital to have a baby. That's why you go to the hospital. And this was the first time that I realized, you know, from now on, like going to the hospital is going to suck. Like there aren't really, unless I guess I'm going to meet a grandchild, there are not really good reasons to go to the hospital anymore once you reach a certain age. And this was kind of the first one.
Yeah.
It does create a mindset that's very different, doesn't it? It all of a sudden puts that, you know, a lot of times I say with my kids, they all think they're invincible, that you just keep going and going. And when you're working a full-time job and you have kids and you're going and going and you're not stopping to think. And then all of a sudden things start to slow down and little things start to pop up, like, well, not many people eat a plastic fork, but I'm just saying things pop up.
Yes.
Right. Things start to pop up and you start to realize, wow, I'm not invincible here.
Right.
I need to maybe slow my pace and enjoy my life a little bit more. It's so interesting. And the way you kind of describe it in the book, all these indignities of midlife, like I love that you call it that, but there's also freedoms that come, like the fact that you stepped down from your job because you didn't want to keep firing people. That's an incredible, did people understand your reason for doing it?
You know, well, I guess it depends on who you ask. My husband understood, right?
Right.
The people who worked for me, I don't know if they understood, because I didn't tell most of them like the stupid stuff that happened kind of above me on the hierarchy in the company, you know? But at the time though, what was interesting was so many people said to me, oh, you're so brave. You're so brave to make this change. And it didn't feel brave at the time. It felt like the only thing to do. But I always, you know, I think I'm comfortable enough with risk that I did it knowing, okay, this could be just a really terrible idea, but, you know, and we might have to really, you know, change our lifestyle dramatically depending on what I do next. But I weighed all of the worst outcomes and it still seemed like the wise thing to do. But I also I don't know how you two feel. You know, I have many friends in their 50s who have reached a point, and I write about this a little bit in the book, of job dissatisfaction that they didn't feel 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Absolutely.
I think we both went through that. We're in our third careers.
Hence why we have a podcast.
Yes. Yeah. We're both on our third careers.
We started this a year and a half ago, and
mm-hmm.
we were both ending careers previously because we felt like there was something else out there. Mm-hmm. So I think part of the freedom that comes from being in your 50s is knowing that the world will not end if you make a tough decision, because it hasn't ended before. Like, you have enough life experience to know that it will be okay, however it works out.
Yeah.
Which you don't have in your 20s and 30s. If you get fired from a job or you leave a job in your 20s, life's going to end, nothing. And then you realize, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I may not know where I'm going, but I know where I don't want to be.
Right.
So,
mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I also think that you're not as easily, well, for me, certainly, and for a lot of my friends, like, you're not as easily embarrassed. So if you fail or fall on your face or whatever, you think, oh, who cares? Mm-hmm. And you care less about what people think.
Absolutely.
You know, mm-hmm. and that, I think, is probably the best thing about middle age, is not really caring about what people think so much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're either with you or they're not. And if they're not with you, like, who cares?
Yeah.
You know?
that has been, I feel like, the biggest freedom that we've gotten. Like, oh, well, there's other people. If you don't want to talk to me anymore, I can talk to somebody else. And it's not the end of the world. So yeah, and I feel like that was so relatable in your book. There's so many relatable things that you write about, but definitely leaving a job, because I know so many women that are like, I just can't do it anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. And it is a tough decision. Like you said, your lifestyle could change. You know, if you're losing one of the incomes, it could change. So you have to think about that. You know, but luckily, usually by this age, you have put some money away.
Right.
You have something to fall back on, or just something, you have time to just stop for a bit. But you do so many other things that are just in your book. You wrote about just hilarious things. And I just wrote, you know, like your thing about rating, don't make me rate you. I'm like, oh my gosh. You know, every time you do something, how would you rate this? How would you rate that?
I know. Yeah. Well, you cannot basically open your phone or interact with any business without being invited to rate them. And I guess it's a convenient, well, I'm a hypocrite, because I will watch movies based on Rotten Tomatoes scores. I will choose restaurants and shoe repair guys and whatever based on Yelp ratings. But I don't want to be asked to rate anything. I don't want
no. It's
but
everything.
Even like our vet, when I take our dogs to the vet, and I love our veterinarian, I get an email asking me to go onto whatever website and rate my experience with my vet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if I were, you know what, Bridget, if I were a nicer person, because I do love my vet, I probably should do it every single time. But instead I think, can I just keep giving you my business and not have to
write?
And especially when they ask you.
Enough?
Yeah, isn't that enough? It should be enough.
I can hit a star, but then they ask you to write a review. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to write a review.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's every time I go get my oil change. They do the pest control, you know, I was like, I think I got almost hounded by the pest control. It was like, I had a phone call.
You'd rather have the bugs.
Like, okay, yeah, the bugs are staying. Don't shoot them back. Gosh. But yeah, so much of that is so relatable. And that's why I just thought this book is great for women in our demographic. And then you also call estrogen the president of the hormones, and which we have talked to so many gynecologists, people who specialize in hormones, that would probably agree with you in that. But can you share a little bit about why you call it the president of the hormones?
Well, I have to say, it's a very non-scientific designation I have given estrogen. But, you know, and going back to a recent episode that you all did with the woman who wrote the book about menopause, I mean, I think she did confirm for me, actually, even though she didn't say that estrogen is the president. I mean, I feel like so many of the things that you encounter, I guess when you start going through perimenopause, are the result of the changing levels of estrogen in your body. And that my estrogen as the president observation comes up in the chapter about sleep, about insomnia. Because it, you know, I mean, there are a couple of reasons why I don't always sleep very well, and you two probably don't sleep very well either. But I think of estrogen as culprit number one, and you know, and then she has a lot of groupies, but she's the, you know, she's the big one.
Yeah, and when she's gone. Yeah, go ahead.
Progesterone must be vice president then, because
I think it is. Yes.
So they got a whole cabinet with them behind it.
Yes, I don't know what to call testosterone. I'm not sure what to call that one. But
I have to tell you, like, and part of the reason I'm not an expert is because I have a great gynecologist. I love her, and I just go to her and basically say, like, tell me what to do.
Yeah.
You know?
You're lucky that you have someone who will do that.
That will listen.
There's so many women who don't get heard from their gynecologist that
Yeah.
just,
Really?
it's just menopause. You're fine.
Really?
You're too young for perimenopause. Oh, we've done a lot of
I got that one.
episodes.
I got you're too young.
You're too young.
And it was a female gynecologist that, you know, and I thought, okay, I know I'm not, because I have sisters, and, you know, my mother did this. And so I knew that wasn't the case, but it's because so many, there's just not all that education on menopause. There's like 30 menopause experts throughout our country.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, that is just so crazy. But I do really feel like that. I hope, I mean, fingers crossed, I hope that's changing. You know, when I listened to your podcast with the women who run the ad agency, who were saying, you know, you can say erectile dysfunction on TV, but you can't say menopause, which is like the most bonkers thing I've ever heard. I've got this, but there was a big story on menopause in the New York Times, maybe last week or the week before.
Yes.
And then I have these friends, actually a former Real Simple colleague who was starting a menopause brand that they're selling on Target.com and selling in select.
Would that be Womaness?
Oh. So Michelle Jacobs, who's one of the two founders, so she and I used to work together at Real Simple. And I think that the traction they're getting, I was on the editorial side, obviously, and she was on the marketing, on the business side. But I think the traction that Womaness is getting, I think they're coming out just at the right moment. I hope.
Well, you know, Fortune has said that menopause is a $600 billion potential industry. So if you're not marketing to that demographic, you're missing it. And that's why one of the reasons why we started this podcast is not just to talk about menopause, but to have the world, the media, society start recognizing and accurately portraying women in midlife and beyond, because we're just not portrayed properly. We are not our grandmother's midlife anymore. And that narrative needs to change. And in line with that, I would be curious, the years that you were, I know you were in the editorial staff, but in the years that you were the editor of Real Simple, was there ever a conversation on menopause? Was it a comfortable topic to bring up in the magazine, or was it considered?
No way. Okay. No, because what happened when I was at Real Simple, when I got there, the median age was of the readership, I can't remember, was maybe like, I don't know, late 30s. Okay. And by the time I left, it was probably close to 50. And which does not make advertisers, to your point, did not make advertisers happy, which is just bananas. I mean, 50-year-old women buy Kraft products. And I mean, I'm not picking on Kraft specifically. I don't know that Kraft was an advertiser who said, we want your readers to be younger, but they were an advertiser in the magazine. So there was a big push. It was big, but it was subtle. It wasn't like, anyway, whatever. To really try to bring in younger readers, because our brand loyalty, which was a good thing, was really strong. Our readers were aging with the magazine, and we weren't capturing younger women. So if we had done a lot of menopause content, you know, it would have just kind of reinforced this thing that was happening that we didn't really want to reinforce. Probably not the answer you want to hear, but it's the honest answer.
No. I'm curious, because this is what we hear time and time again, that brands large companies, and we are now realizing that companies like Procter & Gamble are starting to talk to our demographic with products, which is amazing, but it's a slow change. And the women who are now in the process of noticing skin changes and hair changes and body changes are now starting their own companies. Because if you can't answer it, I will find a way to do that, like you were saying with Womaness, which we love. But it's interesting to see how our demographic is becoming more powerful and comfortable in our voices. And if you can't find a solution, get out of our way. We'll figure it out ourselves.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will create a conversation with other brands and larger companies to say, okay, it's not just about millennials. It's great, but half the millennials are now using their parents' credit cards because we're the power consumers.
Right. I know. I know.
So, who do you want to talk to? Because we have a huge, percentage of powerful consumers, especially women, and we'll buy the products if we believe in them. If word of mouth spreads, that is like Womaness. I use that every night. The Let's Neck.
The neck cream. Oh my goodness.
I'm addicted to it.
I don't know if you've tried it yet.
I haven't. I obviously need to.
It's awesome.
Call Michelle and tell her that we told you to
box.
get the Let's Neck.
Now, you know what? I need to go to Target.com and buy it for Michelle.
Yes.
I'm not going to have her send it to me. I'm not going to pull rank or as a friend with Michelle.
Send me a box.
Well, you know what? Just tell her that you'll put it on the cover of your next book. And then,
and she'll send me a lifetime supply.
Exactly.
But it's fantastic. Yeah.
We're becoming more mainstream, and that's wonderful. And it's going to take all of our voices. It's going to take women who still are at the table to say, you know what, we need to start addressing these concerns. Vaginal dryness is not a horrible topic. You know what I mean? We don't go, Bridget and I said, we don't go from diapers to Depends. There's a whole world
in between there. That. Yes.
So that's why I was curious what the temperature at Real Simple was during that time for midlife women. Because as you said, we were aging with you guys. They were trying to, instead of keeping that strong, loyal base, they were trying to pull in younger people.
Yeah.
But we also did, and obviously menopause involves a lot more than gynecological concerns, but we tended not to do gynecological stuff in the magazine or sex. Like those were two topics and we researched the heck out of that readership, certainly in the early days when the money was there to do a lot of consumer research. And there were some things they really didn't want from that. They didn't want celebrity. They didn't want sex. And so we tended to kind of keep a distance from, like, even gynecological stuff we would do sometimes, but not very often.
Yeah. I was gonna say, they could have like made a little pouch to carry their, lubricant in or something like that.
Sell it at Bed Bath and Beyond.
Yeah, it's like, here, look what we have now. Little stuff. But
sooner or later they will do it.
They will. And just to see, like, Colleen, how you said the millennials are using the parents, and I'm not saying all of it because I've got children and my daughter's not using my credit card, but the millennial, they don't have the money to afford this. And I'll look at different ads, especially the luxury brands, especially like Gucci and Louis Vuitton. And they've usually got somebody under 30 in that ad dripping in Gucci. And I'm like, they can't afford that. Well, maybe that person can, but your typical 30-year-old can't really afford all of these designer labels. But you're not going to see somebody that looks like me in a Gucci ad. So I always, just the representation. I would love to see more representation. But you also just address so many other things in your book. You talked that chapter about your dog, about Rebel. Oh my goodness. I think I was about to cry through the whole thing. And we won't, we can go into it, but I don't want to make you upset, or I don't want to make you sad.
Oh, no, that's
okay.
I don't want to make the guest cry. But just
this
so
would not
many
make
things.
the guest cry.
Yeah. It just was, go ahead.
Well, so the chapter Rebel Love is about this dog we had named Rebel, who, I won't give away what happened to him, but he met an early death as a 1-year-old puppy, which I write about in the chapter. And it was the first time for my kids who then ranged in age from elementary school to college, I guess. It was the first time they had encountered the death of a pet in a way that was surprising and sudden, sort of. Mm-hmm. And so it's a chapter certainly about the loss of Rebel, but we're a huge dog family. We always have 2 dogs at the same time, and I've done a lot of work over the years with Guiding Eyes for the Blind, which is the headquarters are about an hour from our house, and I did a lot of work with them. In fact, when I was between jobs, and so we have adopted puppies from Guiding Eyes, the ones that don't make the cut to be guide dogs, and so Rebel was one of them, and he was the most beautiful dog we've ever had, but maybe also, if I can say, kind of the dumbest. But he was just a real sweetie. And but what the essay I think is ultimately about is this community in the Adirondack Mountains that came together to help us try to find him when he went missing, and they were all just total strangers to us. Mm-hmm. And just the kindness of people, it was the first time. I mean, I'm sure you both have encountered situations and where something bad happens to you or something really good happens to you, but it's often defined in bad moments. And it really, you're always surprised, both pleasantly and in a sad way, at the way some of your friends react, right? Some people really step up and you can't believe it. And then some people just go silent and you can't believe that either, Right. And those are your friends. Like if something really tragic happens in your life or just really tough. This was a situation where something really bad happened that was public, because this whole community knew that our dog had gone missing, and we had signs everywhere, and it was all over social media. And it was the first time in my life when I really, really felt the effect of the kindness of strangers. Mm-hmm. And it was just unbelievable. Yeah. How amazing, particularly when it comes to pets. I mean, there are some people who are really, really a little bonkers in their kindness efforts. But it was really, ultimately, it was a beautiful moment in my life and the life of our kids, because it showed this thing about human nature that was really uplifting. And also, as a side note, if Rebel had not died, we would not have our crazy dog, Jill, who is the kind of the best, craziest dog we've ever had. So if Rebel had lived, we wouldn't have Jill. Yeah. And Jill is a real gift. So.
Well, that was an amazing, I just love the whole thing. And the relatable, you mentioned the 2 people you said that some go overboard, and the 2 that you didn't even know, like calling you and like search, really wanted to help. They really did. They became
There's something about pets we get. Yes. And I think as we get older too, there's just something about the loyalty that a pet shows you. It's like, I heard, I think it was a commercial or something that says, a pet is a special part of your world, but they are your whole world. Mm-hmm. And it does hit you as you get older that they are just, the kids dump you, they move on, but your pets, they're just so loyal. Yeah. They're just excited every time you come home.
Yes. Right. Yes. Yeah.
And there is, and I think it becomes a very sensitive topic for people.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and our dog, who we still have, who was the older dog when we had Rebel, his name is Iggy. He is just an old soul, and he will look at me sometimes, and I think he understands me better than my family does. He'll look at me like, "Oh, Kristin, I know." And so when he's 7, when he reaches the end of his time on this planet, that is going to be a very, very sad day for our family.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, you'll have lots of years.
Yeah.
What do you hope that women get, and men get, from reading this book? What do you want them to take away from it?
I would say optimism. Mm-hmm. I think that, I mean, the subtitle does have the word indignities in it. But what I hope they see within that word is an ability to accept it with humor, to accept the things that you begin to encounter in this middle part of life with humor, and realize, I mean, it's sort of the double-edged sword of midlife. The bad, sort of bad things start to happen to you that didn't happen to you when you were younger, but they make you realize how lucky you are, because things could be a lot worse. Mm-hmm. And so I hope that the book has, I mean, the feedback I'm getting from people so far, I mean, the book's been out for 6 days, but is that they think it's really funny. Most people are like, oh, your book is so funny. But there is a little bit of sadness, like the rebel chapter is one place, but I want people to have, to sense the optimism and gratitude, particularly after the last year that we have been through in our mm-hmm. world, mm-hmm. To know that those of us who are still standing are for the most part, really pretty lucky.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
And even if you swallow a fork and have root canal problems and whatever, you're still alive. So
you're still here.
And the sun is shining. And so, like, what more do you want?
Yes. I just felt like it was so relatable. And probably I always say, if you don't feel so alone in a situation, it just makes you feel better. Like, okay, I'm not crazy. This is happening to other people. And, you talk about your parents and their influence on you. And I love that. And how you mentioned, look, I am this age and I still have both my parents. And yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
which is very lucky.
Yeah, which is very lucky.
Mm-hmm. Which is really statistically improbable, right? I'm 56 years old and both of my parents are alive and my husband's parents are both alive.
Wow.
And when I look at our close friend group, I don't think that's true for any of our good friends.
Mm-hmm. But it does show that we are living longer lives. So what do you want to do with it? It's not when you leave a large career or you raise your children, it's not the end. It's just a transition into something else. So it is amazing. Bridget has lost both her parents. I've lost my dad, and it rocks mm-hmm. your foundation.
Yeah.
I don't care if you have a great relationship with a parent or you hardly see them, it rocks your very foundation. Yeah. But having said that, we are getting the pleasure of having our parents for longer than the last generation did. And hopefully, because we're next, our kids get us for a lot longer time. So, what do you want to do with that? What are you looking forward to in your next, decade?
Oh gosh, that is a really hard question to answer.
How about tomorrow? What are you looking forward to this weekend?
So here's what I'm looking forward to. So I'm in a new career. So working as a literary agent, which I've done for the last 2 years. I started 2 years ago. So I would say in the next decade, I'm looking for increased career success in a new realm, which has been very humbling because I'm not, I've gone back to the bottom of the pile. So I'm looking forward to being better at this new thing that I'm doing. I'm looking forward to seeing my children find jobs that make them happy. And I'm looking forward to having a better garden, I would say.
See, I would say so much to ask.
Yeah. I would say those. What are you looking forward to, Colleen, in the next day and 10 years?
Day and 10 years. There you go. It's a funny thing because I think if you'd asked me that in my 20s, obviously then my 30s, it would have been a very different answer. What those grandiose change the world moments, they're great, but they're not necessary anymore. They're just, so my daughter's getting married in September. I am looking forward to the fact that we can actually have this wedding. I'm very grateful for it. I am looking forward to my youngest graduating college and my husband and I getting back to those trips that we had planned. So it's more about just experience, like watching life happen. I'm looking forward to watching life happen. What about you, Bridget?
Oh, well, I've got 2 kids in their 20s and I feel like my daughter is in a really great place. My son is going back to school. He has a degree in film and it's just been really tough. So he is going back to school. So I think we all agree we want our children to be in a good place. So I'm just hoping that that all works out for him. And, you know, my husband and I, you know, had trips planned that we had to cancel, but he someday, I don't know when, you know, will want to retire. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that will bring us. You know, what are we going to do with that? We're not going to stop, which you mentioned in your book too. At the end, you have the list, which are great list of things to do. And you talk about volunteering, and that's something we're looking into, is where do we want to, you know, volunteer our time. And so I'm looking forward to seeing my family. I'm from a huge family, 12 kids. Yeah. I'm one of 12 kids. So
what?
Yeah,
oh my God.
I love that reaction.
That's amazing.
Every time she tells a guest, I love watching their reaction.
I actually I had family this weekend, Colleen. Colleen just lives down the street from me. Yeah. But I had family. I had one of my sisters that I hadn't seen, you know, in over a year. And her grandson we're in Nashville. So her grandson's at Vanderbilt. And she got to see her grandson for the first time in years. And I had actually like 4 people in my house that, that hasn't happened, you know, like that weren't in my family, you know, well, she's in my family.
No, wait, where do you fall in the birth order?
11th out of 12.
Okay. So my brother-in-law is 10 out of 10, is number 10 out of 10.
Oh, he's the baby.
Oh, he's the baby.
But close to your situation, and his oldest sibling is like 25 years older than you.
Oh yeah. Well, my oldest sibling, 18 years older. But so the one that was visiting, is about 14 or 16 years older than me. She was my godmother. So if something had happened when I was younger, she would have raised me. So, but
that's amazing. That's why you're such a good people person.
Well, there's a lot of
you had to be
there. Right? You had to be.
Right.
Yes, you had to be. Do you have any like book talks coming up?
I mean, if people really want to know, my website is KristinVanOgtrop.com. And so I put the events on the website.
Well, thank you so much for your time and taking the time to talk to us. It's a great book. Everyone, you have got to read her book. Did I Say That Out Loud? Midlife Indignities and How to Survive Them. And so make sure that you find, I got mine on Amazon, but I'm sure they're everywhere. And there is, was it bookshop.org? I used to get, and it would connect you to your.
Bookshop.org is great. Yeah.
Yes. It would connect you to a local.
Yeah. Yeah. You really need your help.
Yeah, they do. They do. So do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to you both for having me. This has been a lot of fun, and I really appreciate your enthusiasm for the book.
We are excited. So we want to make sure our readers check it out. So thank you for coming on and talking about it. Well, we want to thank Kristin so much for coming on and talking about, did I say that out loud, midlife indignities and how to survive them. And like Bridget said in the beginning, we did not even ask her about, the phases of disappointment with her children, which, read the book, guys. It's very funny. And just enjoy it. It's relatable. She shares some great experiences that we can all go, yeah, been there, done that. And that's important in our stage of life. We want to get the word out that we are a force to be reckoned with, but we also have similar experiences that we go through. So make sure to check out her book on Amazon or anywhere you find books. Make sure to check us out. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? There's a little red button. You just press subscribe and you will not miss another episode of Hot Flashes and Cool Topics, which come out every Wednesday. Make sure to follow us on all forms of social media because you'll find us there somehow, some way. We will be there. And check out our new musings from midlife, which are reels on Instagram, where Bridget and I talk about things that you will relate to as well. But reels only let you talk about them for 15 seconds. So it's a quick conversation.
So it's been really hard for me. I have to do a little more editing because I talk too long. Colleen's like, I can't post that one. You're talking too long.
I could post it like 3, but it won't make sense. Yeah. But anyway, guys, have an awesome day and we will talk to you next time.
Bye.